I stood and watched as the coffin was lowered into the ground. In the distance, you could hear the quiet hum of passing cars and muffled conversations of friends and relatives leaving the funeral. My children, Alexander, 21, and Chelsea, 20, stood on either side of me. We hugged each other, drowning in grief. I felt them trembling, silently crying along with me. Unfortunately, their grief was much greater than mine. I knew I should have mourned Joan's death more, but in some twisted, wicked way I was glad it had ended that way. At least I was able to avoid the pain and suffering that divorce would have brought, as well as the financial turmoil that would come with it. Divorce, you ask? Yes, that's right. You see, the night she died in a car accident, I found out that I was married to a lying, cheating, corrupt, easy-to-get woman. I sighed heavily and remembered again how happy our marriage was in the early years and how it began to crumble over the last 2 years. Joan and I started dating during our senior year of high school and continued through our freshman year of college. We became close and quickly realized that we both enjoyed sex. During our first semester of college, we almost lost our scholarships because we got so caught up in partying and sex. Yes, of course, we lived in a dorm, but we still found ways to be together almost every night. As young, passionate people, we managed to find a place where we could indulge in lovemaking several times a week. Joan was not on birth control pills. Our method of protection was condoms. Sometimes, when she thought it was safe, we would have sex without protection. Both preferred the natural sensations of unprotected intercourse. I asked her many times to start taking the pills, but she refused. She was afraid that her parents would find out. As you might expect, condoms broke from time to time. We never found out whether she became pregnant because of this or simply made a mistake in calculating the safe days. Anyway, she got pregnant and we decided to get married. Because she had to take care of the child, Joan did not finish college. I continued my studies, promising her that when everything worked out and the child grew up, she could return to school. However, the right time for Joan to study never came. Eventually, when Alexander was a college student and Chelsea a high school senior, Joanne enrolled again at the university. She plunged into her studies headlong, as if she had never taken a break. Unfortunately, she decided to experience the whole college experience herself. She made friends with students who were younger than her right up to the age of our children. If someone seemed like a good person to her, she accepted him into her company. The more she immersed herself in student life, the more she changed. She was no longer my caring housewife wife. She began to show disrespect to me and became irritated when I complained about her frequent evening absences. She came home later and later, often heavily intoxicated and with wrinkled clothes. Joan began to withdraw from me and became irritated when I invited her to meetings with friends or to company events. Of course, she always had an excuse for why she returned home late, even on those evenings when she did not have classes. According to her, she needed to study in the library, discuss lectures with friends in a cafe, or just relax after a day of study. I think, like most deceived husbands, I simply did not notice the obvious. The only thing I knew for sure was that within a year our sex life had turned from intense and passionate to practically non-existent. She constantly found reasons to refuse me either fatigue or a headache or getting up early the next day. I was only able to make love to her once a week, and then only if I was lucky. And then it seemed more like a handout than a manifestation of love. My life collapsed one Thursday evening. That day Joan had classes until 9:20 p.m. Given the distance to home and traffic, she had to return no later than 10:15 p.m. By 11:30 p.m., I lost my patience and went to bed without her. Of course I was angry. She promised not to stay late with friends anymore and to return on time. I was woken up by the doorbell at 1:20 a.m. Before I could even get up, they started knocking loudly on the door. I'm coming, I shouted, pulling on my pants. He turned on the light in the bedroom and stumbled towards the front door. Who's there? I opened the door, still angry, expecting to see my drunken wife, again unable to get the key into the keyhole. But instead, there was a policeman standing on the doorstep. In the distance, I saw a patrol car parked in my yard. The officer pulled back slightly, then asked, "Mr. Rowland?" "Yes." "Your wife is Joan Rowland." I nodded. "I'm afraid I have bad news for you. The van she was traveling in this evening was rammed by a truck. The truck driver was apparently drunk and ran a red light at high speed. As a result of the accident, your wife and 3 young men who were with her died. I'm sorry, sir. Are you alone now, or do you have someone to turn to?" At that moment, my daughter Chelsea came down the stairs, rubbing her eyes sleepily. She was wearing a robe. "Dad, what happened?" The officer looked at her, then said, "Sir, I'm very sorry. If you come to the station in a day or two, the accident report will be ready. You will also need to identify the body at a time convenient to you." He lightly touched the visor of his cap. "Miss." Then he added, "I'll leave you. Once again, please accept my condolences." I watched the police car back up, then drive away. I felt tears running down my cheeks. At that moment, Chelsea hugged me and gently led me back into the house. We sat down in the living room. I told her what happened, and we sat crying together. We dozed off sitting together on the sofa. Finally, around 6 in the morning, I shook myself and started making plans for the next few days. I called my son at his apartment, then Joan's parents, and then my parents. I also called the funeral home and made arrangements for them to pick up the body. I was still in a state of shock, but I was already beginning to function somehow. Before I had time to properly comprehend the full depth of what had happened, an employee from the funeral home called me. He said they couldn't take the body until I personally verified its identity. I made an appointment to identify Joan's body. While I was on the phone, I remembered the officer's words that Joan had died in the minibus. I called the police to make sure she was not in her car. I also asked about her purse and other personal items. The officer said they didn't have any of her belongings. Records showed that Joan had been tentatively identified based on a medical alert bracelet she was wearing. After I identified Joan's body, my daughter and I drove to the university and drove around campus until we found Joan's parked car. I gave Chelsea a spare key. I waited until she started the car, then headed home with her following. When we got home, Chelsea and I searched the inside of the car for Joan's purse and her books. Not finding them there, we opened the trunk and found several things, many of which were not supposed to be there. Joan's purse lay neatly on top of the carefully folded dress she'd worn to class the night before. When we opened the purse, we found several unused condoms in it. Later that day, to keep myself busy, I started cleaning out the car and found 3 used condoms under the front seat. I began to feel overwhelmed with excitement, even anger. Sometimes Chelsea takes our car to go to college instead of her small pickup truck. My first thought was that she was having fun with one of her boyfriends in the back seat and let him throw used condoms on the floor. I got out of the car with this incriminating evidence in my hands and shouted, "Chelsea, come here, please." When Chelsea walked into the garage, her eyes were still red from crying. I turned to her and asked angrily, "How do you explain this?" I shook the condoms in front of her. I saw her face turn pale and then red as I continued talking. I thought, "No, I hoped we raised you better. You know that condoms are not the best method of contraception. Your mother told you what problems this could cause. How could you take such a risk?" Chelsea looked at me in shock. Then her face contorted and she started crying again. Through my tears, I heard her say, "Oh, Dad, how could you even think that I could do something like that? I take the pill and always make the new guy use a condom, but I would never leave them in my mom's car. Are you saying that these are not yours? But you took the car last weekend. Who else could?" I felt my stomach tighten and I felt nauseous. I fell silent and just stared at my daughter. She also looked into my eyes, and I realized that the same thought had occurred to her. Her hand slowly rose to her mouth, and she blushed again. "Oh," she said. "Oh, no, no, Dad. This can't be. Maybe it's Alex. He sometimes takes his mother's car." The remaining days were filled with calls and visits from family and friends. Relatives from other cities began to come to the funeral. Finally, I called the police and found out that the accident report was ready. I told the family I was going to pick him up, and Chelsea immediately looked away from the conversation. Wait, Dad, I'll go with you. I wanted to tell her no, that I needed to be alone, but she didn't let me get a word in edgewise. No, Dad, I'll go. You don't have to go through this alone, and besides, well, when we arrived at the police station and told the female officer why we were there, she looked at me with sympathy. Then she turned around, went to the file cabinet, and took an envelope from the folder. Returning to the window, she placed the envelope on the counter and covered it with her palm. She looked me in the eyes and said, "Mr. Rowland, I don't know how much detail you were told about this accident, but—" She took a deep breath, exhaled, and continued, "You really shouldn't look at this report unless you absolutely have to. Just let your wife go and keep only good memories of her. I'm truly sorry, sir." I stood there, confused for a moment, then pulled the report out from under her hand. "Thank you, officer. We had problems, but we loved each other. Of course, we will have good memories of life with Joan." The officer looked at me with pain and returned to her desk as Chelsea and I walked out of the station. When we got into my truck, I opened the envelope. The first thing I saw was a stack of photographs. The minibus was crumpled, and the cab of the truck rested on top, its front bumper located approximately where the middle seat was. Next photo. I inhaled sharply. My stomach churned, and a deep sob escaped my chest. "Dad, what happened?" Chelsea asked. I shook my head and tried to stuff the photos back into the envelope. I cried so hard that I couldn't breathe. I felt nauseous and felt my breakfast rising in my throat. I barely had time to open the door before I threw up in the parking lot. "Oh, no," I heard Chelsea moan. When I finished, I wiped my mouth with my hand and turned back to the car, just as Chelsea ran into my arms and began to cry. Now we knew why Joan's dress was neatly folded in the trunk of her car. The photographs and the report told the whole dirty truth. Joan was in the back of the minibus. She was found without clothes, as were the two young men who were with her. When the truck collided with the van, the accident led to chaos. One of the men was trapped, the other was caught in an awkward position. Later tests showed that Joan spent time with them of her own free will. Witnesses confirmed that she left with them voluntarily, without even hiding. Now the truth was in front of me. She turned out to be completely different from what I had imagined her to be. Our family was first devastated by Joan's death, and now even more devastated by her promiscuous behavior. I knew that she was unhappy in her life, but I had no idea that she had become an easily accessible woman. When I thought about her behavior, I was overcome with fear for my health. I didn't know how long she had been partying, and I was afraid that she might have infected me with some kind of disease. I immediately decided to test myself for sexually transmitted infections. Luckily, I didn't have to worry about work. I owned and operated a small construction company, so I didn't worry too much about business. I had a good management system, and my work friends took control of the projects to ensure everything went according to plan and on time. I was in a terrible state for several weeks. I was torn with anger, and I took it out on everyone around me. I was furious with my wife and the three guys who had sex with her, and sometimes screamed in anger, wishing they were alive just so I could hurt them more. Hell, one of them was only 19 younger than our son. The rest were in their early 20s. I wanted to vent my anger, but I couldn't. They were all dead. I put off going to the doctor for a long time to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases because I was ashamed. My children finally made an appointment for me and took me to the doctor themselves. When the results came back, it turned out that I had gonorrhea. Yes, I knew that I should have gotten tested as soon as this thought appeared, but I didn't do it. I suffered from pain and burning when urinating for several weeks, but thought that I had simply chosen the wrong underwear. My wife had not allowed me to make love to her for a long time, and I again began to satisfy myself. About 3 weeks after the funeral, I was sitting in the living room, drinking and looking at the accident report. I again wished that I could make someone responsible for my pain, and then it dawned on me. I couldn't punish my slutty wife or her lovers, but I could try to punish the transport company that deprived me of this opportunity. I decided to find out if I could sue them. When I talked to the lawyer, he literally laughed with joy. It turned out that this transport company often hired drivers with questionable qualifications. They had a whole list of accidents and traffic violations. He was confident that this would help our cause. I told him to file a claim, and the process began. Of course, everything dragged on, as happens in the courts, but in the end it all ended. Almost 2 years after the accident, I became almost $3 million richer after the lawyer took his 30%. My life was still crap, but now I had enough money to build a really fancy toilet. I no longer enjoyed my job, and I couldn't stand being in the house my wife and I were building together. In the end, I decided to give up everything and leave. Yes, I was running from memories and pain, but who cares? At the end of May, my son graduated from college with a degree in construction management. He worked part-time for my company for many years, so I decided to hand over management to him. He and his wife stayed to live in my house for free, with the condition that the guest house would always be available to me. My daughter lived in her basement apartment, which was once intended for servants. I let her know that she could stay there until she decided to move out. I drew up legal documents in which I specified living conditions, job responsibilities, salaries, and other details. I didn't know when I'd be back or where I'd go, so I tried to plan for everything. My daughter studied business administration and also worked part-time at the company, so I was calm, leaving everything to them. 3 weeks after graduation, I loaded up my new Ford F-250 Super Crew Powerstroke 4X4 and hit the road. I didn't know where I was going, when I would get there, or how long it would take. I had a small fifth trailer, 26 feet long, with everything I needed inside. Probably the hippies in the 60s would have said that I went in search of myself. On the back of the trailer, I made a mount for my small 650cc motorcycle, CM. Since it was the beginning of summer, I headed north. The further I went, the calmer I became. On the first day, I drove for 12 hours, stopping only for gas and essential needs. The second day went the same way until I reached Rapid City, South Dakota. I've never been there, but I fell in love with the Black Hills. I found a cozy campsite and stopped there. Every morning I got up to watch the sunrise, slowly drank coffee, enjoying the start of the day, then had breakfast around lunchtime. When it got a little warmer, I would get on my motorcycle and go explore the surrounding area. If I noticed a beautiful place, I would stop to admire the scenery, walk along the trail, or ride my bike closer. I especially liked the town of Keystone. I took the train between here and Hill City several times, exploring both cities. There were many beautiful women here, and the local wineries sold amazing wine. I may have bought and drank too much, but who cares? In the evenings, I either went into town for dinner or stayed at the campsite, cooking and drinking in the company of 3 constant companions, me, myself, and I. Sometimes I walked around the campsite and talked with other travelers. I was surprised by how many people live in mobile homes and do not have permanent housing. They looked so happy. I spent 3 weeks at that campsite and then moved on. Taking I-90 to Sturgis, I learned that the famous biker rally would soon begin there. I decided to stay. I found a good place for the trailer and settled in. When the rally began, I finally began to enjoy life. I was teased for having a small motorcycle, but I soon learned to laugh it off. Of course, it also helped that I treated new friends to beer and some lovely ladies to a place in my bed. After the rally, I had to leave just to take a break from all the women I had slept with. I still dream of these gorgeous beauties walking around the campsite in skimpy outfits. It's only a pity that I had to use condoms. Sometimes, bringing another girl to me, I noticed that her intimate part was still red and sensitive after recent intimacy. To be honest, kissing them embarrassed me a little, but the desire to have sex did not disappear. Was I ashamed of my actions? Oh, the hell with it. I was no longer married, and as far as I knew, the ladies I slept with were not married either. They didn't mind, I didn't mind, and if I hadn't ended up between their legs, someone else would have. I was even tempted to take a couple of them with me, but common sense prevailed, and I ignored their hints and suggestions. I continued west on I-90 and fell in love with Montana. I have stayed in the western part of the state several times, again meeting wonderful people at the campgrounds. One campsite was especially memorable. It was located near a small town called Rock Springs, just east of Missoula. At that moment, there was an egg festival taking place there. There were cowboys, cowgirls, bikers with their girls, and also ordinary people like me. As night fell and under the influence of drink, breasts were exposed and private parts were exposed, although not as openly as in Sturgis. I was only there for one day and night, but managed to enjoy a wonderful wet t-shirt contest during the day. I admit that I was only a spectator that night. The women there weren't as beautiful as some of the ones I'd seen in Sturgis, and I'd had enough fun that week at the motorcycle rally. The next morning I set off again, and in the late afternoon, when I left the mountains, I no longer liked the scenery. I hit the gas pedal and took off towards Seattle, Washington. Oh yes, I spent a whole month there, just enjoying the views. I camped on the beach for a few days, then climbed Mount Rainier and set up camp again. I let go of the past, forgot my pain, and it was wonderful. I finally decided to head south and took us 1 and 101. If I liked something, I stopped. It took me another 6 weeks to get to San Francisco. I spent a few days there and then moved on again. For some reason, Southern California didn't make much of an impression on me. Yes, there were many beautiful women there, and on the beaches they flaunted their charms, but their behavior and attitude towards life seemed unnatural and false to me. They didn't pique my interest, so I headed east on I-10. Oh God, what a bore it was. Mile after mile of the same desolate landscape. I finally made it to one of my favorite cities, San Antonio. Joan and I loved walking along the riverside, and, despite the memories of it, I had a wonderful week there. There I again found great food and beautiful, willing women. I remember one of them especially well. This young woman quickly won my heart. She was half Spanish and worked at the campground where I was staying. She was the one who processed my registration. I don't know why, but sympathy immediately arose between us. The evening I first moved in, I was sitting under the awning of my trailer, enjoying the cool air, when I saw her coming down the driveway. She was wearing a tiny two-piece swimsuit, and her curvy body was practically on display. I figured she was about 22 or 23 years old, but later found out she was 27. She was about 170 cm tall and weighed about 57 kg. Her black hair almost reached her shoulders, and her smile lit up the evening when she noticed me. This little coquette came up to me and said, "Well, what are you doing here in this heat? You should at least take a dip in the pool. I know for sure that it is cool there. If we don't like the pool, many of us go swimming in the river. But the water in the pool is cleaner. Yes, it's hot here, but I just enjoyed the view. I think I'll go to the pool soon. I needed to relax a little after a long journey." Well, hurry up. The water is great, and you can always talk to someone there. Maria smiled at me and walked back to the center of the camp, to the pool, which was about 25 meters from my place. I watched her tight ass move seductively as she walked. After walking a couple of meters, she looked over her shoulder, saw that I was looking, smiled, and continued on her way. Perhaps her hips moved even more gracefully. I watched until Maria was out of sight. Then he got up, went into the trailer, and changed into swimming trunks, after which he went to the pool. When I approached, Maria was floating on her back in the deep end. In the shallow part, 2 children were frolicking with a plump woman, whom I supposedly took for their mother. An elderly couple was sitting at a table with books. I dove into the water, swam quickly for 3 laps, then climbed out, grabbed my float chair, and got back in the water. My weight forced him to submerge a little, leaving only his head and shoulders above the water. I relaxed, opened a can of beer, and began to watch Maria. She stopped swimming and turned to face me. Her feet barely touched the bottom of the pool as she came closer. The water was surprisingly cool compared to the hot air. Maria floated over to my chair and put her hands on its plastic armrests. I was slightly disappointed because her breasts were hidden behind them. She rested her chin on her hands and looked at me. "You're not energetic at all, are you? I don't often see men just sitting in chairs like this." "Yes, probably. I used to have a construction company, and I was always on the move. And this chair allowed me to relax while staying in the water. I guess I still use it out of habit. This makes it easier to communicate with people without overheating. Maria and I talked for over an hour until she had to leave. During this time, I learned that she was the daughter of the campground owners and had recently completed her studies in business management. She was married, but her husband drank and cheated, so she divorced him. She returned home to help her parents until she decided what she wanted to do with her life. Over the next 2 days, we became closer. She was easy to talk to and cheerful. We discussed her dreams and plans, as well as possible business ideas. That evening, as we were leaving the pool, she took my hand. On the way to my trailer, her hand slid into my belt, and mine wrapped around her waist. We stopped at my door, and she turned to me. She moved closer, and I felt her breasts press against my stomach. Her arms wrapped around my waist, and she stood on her tiptoes to give me a tender kiss. Nothing was said. She opened the door, took my hand again, and gently pulled me into my trailer. I, like a sheep to the slaughter, followed her, as if deprived of will. Maria closed the door behind us and watched my face as she first took off the top and then the bottom of her swimsuit. I stood with bated breath, looking at the goddess who appeared before me. I opened my mouth to speak, and she put her fingers on it. As I closed my lips, she grabbed the waist of my swimsuit and pulled it down. Without thinking, I took a step, freeing myself from my swimsuit. Maria smiled at me again and sat down in front of me, taking a squatting position. She gently ran her hand over my skin, her touch gentle and careful. Desire shone in her eyes, and with every second the tension between us grew. She approached me, her lips left light kisses, and the warmth of her breath burned my skin. Her fingers ran along my back, causing a pleasant shiver, and I couldn't help but notice how her own body was reacting to this moment. She enjoyed every moment, completely surrendering to our touches. Her movements were smooth, confident, as if she knew exactly how to bring me to the highest point of pleasure. I felt a wave of pleasure cover me and could hardly hold back a moan. She looked at me, her eyes shining, her lips parted slightly. This moment lasted an eternity until the tension building in the air reached its peak. I exhaled heavily, sank into a chair, watching her. She was enjoying what was happening no less than me. Her body was trembling slightly, and her breathing was intermittent. Her lips curved into a satisfied smile, and a pleasant silence hung in the room, filled only with our breathing. We remained in this position for several more minutes, enjoying the silence and closeness of each other. There was a soft, peaceful calm in the room. Light twilight, warm air filled with a subtle aroma of Mary. Her breathing was even, relaxed, and her fingers continued to gently touch my hand, as if not wanting to lose this contact. Finally, Maria stood up a little and looked at me. There was something warm, affectionate, inviting in her eyes. She took my hand again. Her touch was soft, confident. Easily pulling me along with her, she brought me closer to the bed. Her movements were graceful, filled with calm confidence. We approached the bed, and Maria slowly pulled back the top blanket, as if inviting me to join. She sank down onto the soft surface, stretched out in the center, her body relaxed into the bedding. She looked at me with a slight, almost playful smile, her fingers casually touching the edge of the pillow. I sat down next to her, feeling the warmth of her proximity. We were silent, but in this silence there was no awkwardness, only anticipation and understanding. Maria reached out to me, her palm slid over my arm, then rested on my shoulder. Her touches were light, enveloping, as if she was studying me again, getting used to this moment. I slowly ran my fingers over her wrist, feeling her pulse beating under her skin. She sighed, closing her eyes as if soaking in every moment. Time seemed to slow down, turning into a chain of short but significant moments. I leaned towards her and inhaled the subtle scent of her skin. It was something familiar, warm, soothing. Maria pressed herself close to me, her breathing quickened, but not from excitement, but from something deeper: trust, intimacy, unity. Several moments passed, filled with light touches and quiet signs. We took our time, enjoying the feeling of each other's presence. After some time, Maria looked at me. Her eyes were full of tenderness. She smiled, stroked my cheek with her fingertips, and quietly whispered, "It was wonderful. Thank you." I touched her palm, intertwining our fingers. She smiled even wider. Her lips trembled slightly, and she added with a slight hint of playfulness in her voice, "Now, maybe you'll stay close." I nodded without thinking. She turned to me, pressed closer. Her head rested on my shoulder. We lay there, enjoying the silence and each other's presence. Time has lost its meaning. All that was left was this moment filled with warmth, peace, and the feeling that now everything is exactly as it should be. I shifted on top of Maria, and she gently guided me into position. Our bodies merged into a single movement, filled with warmth and passion. She wrapped her arms around me, her breathing hitched, and her fingers slid along my back, leaving barely perceptible marks. We moved in the same rhythm, feeling every touch and every wave of pleasure growing inside. Maria pressed herself against me, her body responded to my movements, and soon we were completely synchronized, getting lost in this whirlwind of feelings. I could feel her body trembling in anticipation as she pressed herself tighter against me. The whole world has narrowed down to these moments filled with tenderness, passion, and absolute intimacy. A wave of pleasure covered us at the same time, forcing us to freeze in one impulse. We lay next to each other for a long time, enjoying each other's warmth, before fatigue finally plunged us into a sweet sleep. The next morning at dawn, I woke up with an unbearable desire to empty my bladder. Maria was still wrapped around me. As soon as she felt me trying to get up, she woke up and smiled at me. I felt her hands try to hold me again. "Please, Maria," she said, "I need to go to the toilet, otherwise there will be a much bigger puddle in our bed," I joked. Maria smiled and kissed me tenderly, letting me go. I decided to use the restroom on the campgrounds rather than in my trailer. I grabbed my shaving kit, towel, and swimsuit and left. I was only gone for about 10 minutes, but as I came out of the restroom, I ran into Maria's father. He looked worried and stopped me. "Steve, have you seen Maria? She was going to go to the pool last night, but never came back. This doesn't sound like her. Her mother and I are worried that something happened to her." Oh shit, I thought. I just stood there staring at him, not knowing what to say. How would I feel if one of my children, even if they were already adults, did not receive a call or return home? I heard my trailer door slam behind me and saw the look on Maria's father's face when he spotted her. His gaze briefly fell on her and then turned back to me. I blushed. Maria came up to me, put her arm around me and said, "Daddy, I'm sorry I made you worry. I didn't want to stay late last night. Steve and I just fell asleep, and I didn't have time to call or get home." I looked at Maria. She was in her swimsuit. Not only did I leave a mark on her neck, but she still had that seductive, just got laid look. She was slightly disheveled, and her body was glowing. I turned to her father. His lips pressed into a thin line. He stared at me angrily for a few seconds, then turned and left without saying a word. I hugged Maria and said, "Damn, that didn't work out very well. Maria, I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix this. You should have called or come home last night. Now it looks like I'd better leave before the situation gets worse. Do you think I should talk to him?" "No, Steve," Maria said. "It's my fault. I'll fix everything. Please don't leave because of this. Please." Maria went to the camp office where her father was. I went back to the trailer, made some coffee, and sat on the porch overlooking the office. I heard voices raised, and as it seemed to me, I heard Mary crying. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore and walked up to the office. I walked in and heard Maria talking to her parents in the back room. I walked around the counter and entered a small break room. All three family members looked up at me as I entered. Maria's father and mother glared at me, and Maria looked guilty and embarrassed. "Mr. Hardy, I need to apologize. I did wrong. I understand how I would feel if my daughter behaved like this. I just wasn't thinking, and unfortunately, my need for intimacy outweighed my common sense and honor. Please don't be too hard on Mary. I paid for a week's stay here, but given this incident, I will leave as soon as possible today. I'm sorry I brought trouble to your family. Maria is a wonderful young lady, and you should be proud of her." Felicia gasped, covered her face with her hands, and began to cry. "How can we be proud of what she did last night? We raised her so that she wouldn't lie around with just anyone." Mr. Hardy looked at his wife, then glared at me again. He took a step towards me, but stopped, then turned to his wife and pulled her towards him. I blushed and hastily apologized. "No, I didn't mean that at all. Yes, Maria and I were reckless, but that's not what I meant. Maria received a good education. She is smart, educated, and capable. She is a wonderful young woman. I'm sure she's sorry she made you worry. Look at the remorse on her face. But be proud of her for her achievements and forgive us for this mistake." Maria came up to me, put her arm around my waist, leaned her head against my shoulder, and looked into my eyes. I saw the glint of tears in the corners of her eyes. Then she turned to her parents again and said, "Mom, Dad, I already said that I'm sorry for making you worry. I didn't want this, but, Mom, I'm already a woman, and I have my own desires. I like this man. He is special, and I myself allowed my emotions to take over. Mom, you know that he is not my first. Please don't blame him for this. I dragged him into the trailer myself, first undressed myself, and rushed to him myself." Maria smiled at me, then continued, "He's just a man, Mom. He did what nature wanted when a naked woman appeared before him." Felicia gasped and blushed again, and Mr. Hardy glared at both of us, especially Maria. Then he gave up and said, "You're right, Maria. You are already a woman and should live your own life. We just expect more attention from you while you live under our roof. I don't like the idea of you hanging around with just anyone, but it's your decision. Just please let us know about this so that we don't worry so much." Mr. Hardy turned to me and added, "Steve, I can't say I approve of what you and Maria did. Damn it, at her age, you could be her father. How would you feel if a man your age slept with your daughter? Having said that, I believe that you don't have to leave if you don't want to. What's done is done." "I think I better leave," I said, and turned to leave, but Maria grabbed me. "No, Steve, please don't leave now. Please. I want to talk to you more about business and just stay a few more days. For my sake." I gave in and stayed another week. Maria and I talked about plans for the business and her future. Although I never became close to her parents, they treated me politely. In fact, Mr. Hardy was even enthusiastic about the idea of opening a small store and gas station. I offered all my ideas on this matter and spent a lot of time with Maria. She was truly special. She made me feel more alive than I had since Joan died. By the time I decided to leave San Antonio, the weather back home was starting to cool down again. I didn't want to go back, much less face the winter cold, so I decided to go to Florida. On the day of departure, Maria cried. She pressed herself close to me and made a whole scene, kissing me goodbye. I even noticed a little regret on her parents' faces. Strangely, it was not easy for me to leave all this behind either. I had a business card with contacts for the business, their phone number, email, and postal address. They knew both my phone number and email address. I saw Maria watching me in the rearview mirror as I drove out, the camp flashing in the distance. Once again, I found myself on I-10 heading east. This time, the scenery was less bleak than west of San Antonio. I gave myself 5 days until my next pre-booked trip. I tried to enjoy the time and drove slowly. I had a few weeks' rights to a timeshare in Florida, so I either booked those dates or could stay longer with Maria. I spent time at pools and vacationing at resorts, but something still wasn't right. I met a lot of good people, and hanging out with them helped me recover, but I missed the good times I had in San Antonio. I moved even further south and eventually ended up in Keys West in the Florida Keys. It was so crowded that I spent most of my time riding my bike. I had to be careful, especially when drinking and driving, but I spent many evenings at local establishments within walking distance of my RV park. I also used the bus service frequently. I have become friends with many of the employees at my favorite bars and restaurants. I guess I'm already a local since I was there for 3 months. My kids were upset that I wasn't home for the holidays, but I just didn't feel like doing it. I invited them to come to me, but they refused. On Christmas Eve, I found myself at my favorite restaurant and bar, drinking margaritas and listening to Christmas music. I had already finished my dinner and was in no hurry to return to my lonely trailer. It was 2030 and almost all the visitors had already left. Employees were closing down parts of the establishment and cleaning up, preparing to close the bar by 9 p.m. so they could go home to their families. My favorite waitress spent the evening serving me. I noticed that she looked almost as sad as I did. She came to my table and said, "Last call, Steve. Would you like one more before you go home?" I looked at her and, acting without thinking, noticed the traces of tears on her cheek and reached out to wipe them away. She flinched when I extended my hand and pulled back. I still managed to grab her hand, pulled her towards me and said, "You look as sad as I do, Amanda. It looks like you were crying. I'm sorry I scared you. I didn't think so." Amanda sank down and tears flowed freely. I pulled her to my knees and hugged her as she began to cry. Her boss came out of the kitchen and approached, waving his hand, saying, "Damn, Steve, what are you doing with Amanda? I thought you were a normal guy. Let her go and get out before I call the police." I let go of Amanda and began to stand up, saying, "Hey, Sid, I didn't mean to upset her." I saw that she was feeling bad and asked what happened. She started crying even harder, so I pulled her towards me for a moment to comfort her. "Don't make a problem out of it. I'm sorry." I was about to leave when Amanda croaked, "No, Steve, please don't go." She turned to Sid and said, "Sid, he didn't do anything. We were just talking and I was confused. I was so upset all evening." Sid replied, "Okay, Mandy, but if he bothers you, just scream. It's better for you to take off your uniform now. The boys and I will finish here. At least try to have fun. Merry Christmas to you." Amanda said through tears, "Merry Christmas, Sid." Amanda watched Sid walk back behind the bar, then followed him. They talked for a while, after which Sid smiled and handed her a large pitcher of margaritas and 2 glasses with ice. I watched as Amanda casually moved around the room, heading towards me with our drinks. I felt my excitement growing as I admired her poetic walk. She had the most beautiful long legs and amazingly toned buttocks. I thought she should be working at Hooters instead of this slightly shabby bar in the Keys West, but I was glad she was here so I could watch her gracefully walk past me in the evenings. When we had finished half the jug, Amanda told me about her tears. She was supposed to work the morning shift and told her partner about it, but yesterday she agreed to work the evening shift for one of her friends. The friend was going to leave the city early, and between them there was an exchange of shifts for money. Amanda went to the beach, rested for a while, then returned home to change clothes, eat something, and go to work. At home, she found her boyfriend in bed with 2 friends. Of course, an argument broke out between them. Since she was living with him in his small trailer, he kicked her out, threw all her clothes out the door, and locked her inside. "Oh, Steve," she continued, "now I have nowhere to go, and I don't make enough to rent a decent apartment, even if I find one on Christmas Eve. Sid said I could live on the pull-out couch in his garage for a couple of days, but I don't know what I'll do after that." It turns out that a 33-year-old woman is forced to return home to her mother because her life has collapsed. I caught my cheating husband, and then my new cheater, and again I was left with nothing. What the hell is this? I don't understand why I'm even trying. I thought about her story. Finally, sighing, I said, "Mandy, I don't have a lot of space, but you can stay with me for a couple of days. You can take the other bed in my trailer if you want. It's not luxury, but I think it's better than sleeping on a pull-out couch in the garage." I laughed and added, "I guess we already have enough in common, considering we've already been through everything our partners have inflicted on us. I wouldn't want you to continue to suffer because of something some asshole did. And believe me, I know how it happens." After some talking and convincing, and another pitcher of Sid's great margaritas, Amanda was finally convinced to come with me through the holidays. As we were about to leave, we could still hear Sid banging on the kitchen. Amanda told him we were leaving, and we staggered a little outside and headed to my trailer. I remember struggling to get the key into the lock and Amanda giggling, staggering around and watching me. Finally, I managed to open the door and pointed to the sofa that turned into a spare bed. "Here's your bed, Mandy. The shower and toilet are in that big building in the center of the camp, or you can use my small bathroom if you don't mind being cramped. I usually use it at night and go to camp during the day." I trudged to bed and didn't know anything until it was almost Christmas Day. I probably would have slept even longer, but the damn phone woke me up. I awkwardly reached towards him and muttered, "Hello." I heard Chelsea giggle over the loud conversation. In an overly cheerful voice, she almost sang, "Merry Christmas, Daddy. How are you? We miss you very much." "I was fine until you woke me up, honey." She giggled again and then asked, "Did you wake me up? But it's already afternoon there. Why are you sleeping at this time?" I completely forgot that Amanda was spending the night in the trailer and went to the kitchen to put on the coffee. I didn't bother to get dressed, and since I sleep naked, I shocked her. The first thing that reminded me of her presence was her sigh. I looked up and saw Mandy blushing as she turned away. "Oh, damn," I said. "Sorry." I turned around and hurried back to my room, and meanwhile Chelsea asked, "What are you apologizing for, Dad? It's okay if you take a nap. Sorry for waking you up." I hesitated, trying to answer. "What? Oh no, it's okay, honey. Just thinking. Everything is fine." I had already pulled on my swimming trunks and put my phone away while I put on my t-shirt. Returning to the main part of the trailer, I saw that Amanda was already making coffee. She looked at me, blushed slightly, and said with a forced smile, "Looks like you forgot I'm here, huh?" "Yes, sorry. I hope I didn't confuse you too much." "Dad, who are you talking to? I thought you were sleeping." "Oh, Dad, I'm sorry." I didn't want to interfere. "No, Chelsea, it's not what you're thinking. One of my friends stayed overnight with me because she was kicked out of the house. I just forgot she was here and went to make coffee, which scared her. You didn't interfere with anything." Chelsea laughed again, and I smiled as I watched Mandy's face turn a deep blush. Chelsea, Alex, and I chatted for a couple more minutes, and then I hung up. Amanda handed me a cup of coffee, and I apologized again. "Really, Mandy, I'm sorry. Now you know that I sleep naked. I just didn't think. I promise this won't happen again. At least I hope so." For some reason, Amanda and I formed a special bond, and she never moved out of my trailer. 2 months flew by unnoticed. Amanda insisted that since I provided her with a place to live, she would provide us with food and drink. It turned out that she was a great cook, and we got along great. We became best friends, but only friends. Yes, we were used to seeing each other naked, or almost naked, and of course, I couldn't help but admire her body, but we never had sex. We could hug, we even kissed a couple of times, but no more. By the end of February, it was time to move on. I didn't want to spend the summer in Key West, and I also missed other places. On one of her days off, Mandy and I relaxed and sipped margaritas by the pool. I finally decided to tell her that I was leaving. I poured us another glass and said, "Mandy, I don't know how best to say it, so I'll say it straight. It's time for me to move on. I don't want to stay here for the summer, and I want to see my children. You helped me recover, and I really appreciate the time I spent with you, but—" I noticed her eyes became slightly moist. Her voice shook as she answered, "I was waiting for this. I knew that you would go north when it got warmer. Honestly, I don't know what to do. I'm tired of working in a bar, but I don't have many options here. I have some savings. I think I'll quit and go home. Maybe I'll find something there. The tourist season will begin soon, and many places in Branson are hiring workers for the summer. My parents live near the city, so I can stay with them." That same day, I informed the camp office that I was leaving on Saturday. It was Tuesday, so I had time to get things done. I hoped that Amanda would find somewhere to live for her remaining days. The next day, Mandy returned home and said she had quit. She agreed to work a week and train a replacement. Sid did not insist on the traditional 2 weeks of work. She smiled and said, "I'd appreciate it if you could drop me off at the bus station when you leave on Saturday." Certainly. Anything for a friend, Mandy. By Friday evening, I had already packed everything and put it in its place. All that was left to do in the morning was to disconnect the trailer from electricity, water, and sewerage, and we could hit the road. Amanda was watching my final preparations, and then it dawned on me. "Hey, Mandy, I'm heading north, which is on the way to Missouri. My family is only 70 miles from Branson. If you are not urgent, you can come with me. I plan to stop along the way and won't be home until mid-April, but you can leave earlier if you want. The closer you are to home, the cheaper the ticket will cost you. What do you say?" Amanda looked at me for a few seconds and then smiled. "I agree. Thank you. I'll enjoy traveling with you, and I'll save money too. I don't think I'll stay with you the whole way because I need to look for a job. Many people start hiring as early as March. I decided to drive along the west coast of Florida. We stayed in Fort Myers for a week, enjoying the beach, swimming in the bay, and relaxing. Amanda was special. We understood each other perfectly and loved the same things. One evening, we went to a small coastal bar with excellent shrimp. We drank a couple of pitchers of beer and ate all-you-can-eat shrimp. Most of the visitors were young people, and they clearly did not like the presence of several older people, including Mandy and me. Several guys from the next table took turns asking her to dance. She politely refused, but with each refusal their irritation grew. We heard someone call her a flirting trash and me an old goat. We decided to leave, but first we went to the toilet. When I came out, I heard a noise from the ladies' room. Mandy was nowhere to be seen. Then I heard her voice. "No, idiot. Get out of here and leave me alone." I said, "I don't want to dance with you. Listen, baby. You are a real MILF, and I want to dance with you. Come on. When we're done dancing, if you still want to be with that old fart you came with, you can find him again. It's spring break, and we're here to party, so let's get going." The door to the women's restroom opened, and one of the thugs who had been harassing Mandy walked out, dragging a crying Amanda with him. He saw me and grinned. Mandy looked at me with fear. I didn't say anything. He took half a step towards the bastard and kicked him. Hit him right in the groin. He let go of Amanda's hand and doubled over. I raised my knee and slammed it into his face as hard as I could, pushing down on his head at the same time. Damn, that hurt. He groaned and collapsed on the floor. I looked at him, writhing in pain, with one hand on his face and the other on his groin. There was a large bloody stain on my trousers. I quickly pulled Mandy towards the exit. We had almost reached the door when one of the men at the table noticed us. He stood up and said, "Damn, I thought Joe went after that bitch." The other two headed towards the corridor where the toilets were located. I sped up and pulled Amanda out the door. When it closed, I heard a scream. We rushed to the pickup truck, and I pulled out onto the street. We had already gone a few meters when the bar door swung open again and 3 guys ran out. They just stood and looked after us. Amanda cried silently. I reached out and squeezed her hand for a moment. It took us 10 minutes to get to our campsite. Walking into the trailer, I pulled Amanda close and hugged her. She was shaking all over and sobbing quietly. Carefully, I sat her down on my bed, took off her shoes, then laid her down. Taking off my boots, I climbed into bed and held her close to me. We both gradually fell asleep. During the night, I woke up only once to go to the toilet. After that, he went to the front of the trailer and prepared a bed for Amanda. I spent the rest of the night there. The next morning, I was woken up by the smell of coffee. Amanda was already awake and preparing breakfast. "Steve, thank you for last night," she said. "I know you lay next to me for a while." "Why did you leave? I didn't want to kick you out of your bed." "Mandy, I needed to go to the bathroom and, well, after everything that happened, you didn't need an old guy pestering you. I decided that it would be better for both of us if I slept somewhere else until morning." "You didn't pester me. I know you would never do that. Why would I even think?" She glanced at my groin, saw my morning erection, blushed, and added, "Oh, well, I know that you would never do anything that I didn't want." Amanda finished her coffee in silence, then looked at me and said, "Steve, I've had enough. I want to go home. I think if you take me to the bus station, I'll just leave, and you stay here if you want." "Well, if that's what you decide, I can take you. But I also think it's time to move on. Why don't we just pack up and leave? If I find a place where I want to stop, I will take you to the nearest station. It will save you money, and it won't be a problem for me either. I was going to continue on anyway." Amanda smiled and nodded. "Okay, if you're really planning to leave, I'll stay with you until you decide to stop. Just don't leave because of me." "No, after last night, I want to leave myself. It's unlikely that those idiots will report us to the police, even if they wrote down the license plate of my pickup truck, but I still don't want to take the risk. It would be unpleasant to run into them again, especially if they decide to take revenge en masse. Anyway, I was planning on going to Bradenton or Clearwater in a couple of days." Mandy smiled her dazzling smile and hugged me. "How can I help you, boss?" I assigned her a few light tasks and got to work preparing the trailer for the trip. It was strange, but I was starting to miss home in Missouri. I saw beautiful places, met wonderful people, had a rest. But now I again wanted to strive for something, to do something useful. However, I was not excited about the thought of returning to my hometown and business. I felt sick thinking about Joan and the places we went together. On the drive, Mandy and I chatted about home. She said her parents own a piece of land on a lake near Hollister, a small town south of Branson. She recalled how much fun it was as a child to swim in the lake and run through the hills. Her stories reminded me of the land I inherited from my wife after she died, a little less than 26-acre lakefront property near Hollister. It belonged to her grandfather until the government took most of his farm when they built the lake. He kept this piece of land for himself and once ran a fishing camp there. When we approached the Bradenton exit, I didn't turn. We passed several exits into Clearwater, and I noticed Mandy eyeing with interest the campgrounds that I would have otherwise stopped at. Finally, she turned to me. "Steve, why are we moving on? I thought you were going to stay here." Mandy, in the morning I realized that I was tired of this state. I want to go home. Here, of course, the weather is good, but it seems that I have already survived and let go of everything that was gnawing at me. Your stories about the house and the lake made me longing for my native place. I think I'll just go back to Missouri for the summer. If you want, I can drop you off at the nearest bus station, but since I'm heading home, you can come with me. The travel time is approximately the same, and traveling with me will be much more comfortable than on the bus. Are you sure, Steve? Aren't you doing this just for me? Come on." While you were talking, I remembered a small piece of land on a lake near Hollister that belonged to my wife and I. Me. I haven't been there for many years. My wife inherited it from her family, and now I think it's mine. There used to be a fishing camp or resort there. I think I'll find this place and see what it looks like. Maybe I'll just drive my RV there and live for a while. I'm still not ready to go back to my old house and meet everyone. I'm sure the whole town already knows what Joan did to me, and I don't want to discuss it. For some reason, I am not at all happy about returning to my company. According to the financial statements, my son and daughter are running it as well as I am, so why bother? Besides, if I return, their income will decrease, and they are young and need money to get on their feet. Okay, Steve, if you are sure that you are not doing this for my sake, then I don't mind. It took us 3 days to get to Amanda's house. Driving my motorhome down the narrow country roads to her parents' house was another challenge, but we managed it. She was greeted with open arms and tears. After meeting the family, I tried to leave, but her father didn't want to hear about it. He insisted that I park next to the house and connect my trailer to their water and electrical service. Amanda told her parents how much I had helped her, so they treated me like an honored guest. Although I noticed a few puzzled looks, they were clearly wondering about their daughter's virtue. Well, how could it be otherwise? A beautiful, sexy woman lives with a man for 3 months, and there is nothing between them. Even I wouldn't believe this if I didn't know the truth. I adored Amanda, but we were friends, not lovers. I can't explain it. She was one of the few available women with whom I not only did not sleep, but did not even strive to do so. Well, yes, I sometimes looked at her, but not enough to check what it was like to be with her. I think after a week, even her parents believed it. One evening, I was sitting on the veranda when her father came out to me with a couple of bottles of Newcastle ale. He sat down next to me, handed me a beer, and said, "You know, Steve, I just can't understand you, son. You're a good guy as far as I'm concerned, and I appreciate you helping Mandy, but, damn, I just don't know how you do it. If my wife did to me what yours." I felt a sharp pang when Frank mentioned Joan. He seemed embarrassed when he saw the expression on my face. "You know, Frank," I said, "I did things on this trip that I'm not very proud of. I dated quite a few women, especially at first. I think I was trying to get back at Joan or something. Or maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I was still a man, that I was still desirable to women. Don't know. When I met Amanda, she was working at a bar in Key West, and of course I liked her. But we became friends, homies. When her boyfriend kicked her out of the house, I invited her to stay with me for a few days and promised that I would not interfere with her. We were probably just used to each other, but neither of us had any desire to cross that line." Frank looked at me and shook his head. Afterwards, we just sat and watched the sun set over those beautiful hills. When it completely disappeared over the horizon, he turned to me again. "Mandy says you have a piece of land here on the lake. She said, are you going to stay there for a while?" "Yes, I think I'll try to find him. I haven't been there for 10 or 12 years. It was my wife's property. She inherited it from her grandparents. There used to be a fishing resort there, and I'm thinking of spending the summer there if I can find a place to park the trailer." Frank thought for a moment and then said, "You know, there's a place nearby, about 3 miles down the road. On the shore, there are old piers and several dilapidated houses. A woman seems to live in one of them, taking care of the place as best she can. Tomorrow is Saturday. I have a day off. If you want, we can go and have a look." "I have a map in my trailer," I answered. "Let's take a look." I knew the site was here somewhere, but I wasn't sure where. I thought, if I don't find it, I'll start calling local authorities to find out. I brought the map and Frank and I studied it. "Yes, this looks like the right place," he said. Then he looked at my mobile home and added, "Let's take my Jeep Wrangler, if you don't mind. Here the roads can be rough and narrow. We shouldn't drag your truck until we figure out what's what." The next morning, right after breakfast, Frank and I packed the refrigerator with sandwiches and beer and then hit the road. At the last moment, Amanda ran out of the house and jumped into the Jeep. "Hey guys, I want to go too." The journey took longer than we expected, almost 7 miles instead of 3, if you count as the crow flies. Eventually, we came across a gate with a sign that said, "Private property. Passage is prohibited." We were sure that this was the right place, so we decided to move on. After another 300 feet, the path was blocked by a steel cable with a lock and another private property sign. We couldn't drive, we could only walk. "It looks like we'll have to walk further," I said. "I don't have a key, and I'm not sure that I even have one." We had walked about a quarter of a mile when we turned a corner and saw an overgrown area with several houses. Only one of them looked residential. It looked like it had once been an office and bait shop. Behind the houses, one could see a dilapidated pier and a beautiful lake. We were looking around when a clearly dissatisfied woman came out of the hut. "What the hell are you doing here? Don't you know how to read? This is private property, and I'm sure you walked past at least one no trespassing sign to get here." As she came closer, I noticed a small pistol tucked into the waistband of her pants. "Steve Rowland and Jolene. Sorry to bother you, ma'am. We saw the signs, but unless I'm in the wrong place, this area belongs to me, so I'm essentially not trespassing. I wanted to explore the land. If this is really my property, then maybe I'll bring a trailer here and live here for a while. Was this Rory fellow's place before? If so, I inherited it when my wife Joan died. My name is Steve Rowland." The woman relaxed a little when I said this. She examined me carefully and answered, "Yes, this used to be Rory's place, and I remember little Joan. I think you're okay, but you should have called me or something. You probably want me to get out of here now, right?" I looked around and said, "No, there is no need for this, unless you yourself want to leave. As far as I understand, you were supposed to look after this place in exchange for the right to live here. I see you've done some work, but I would like it to be a little tidier around here. If you want to continue living here, I could use some help cleaning up. Listen, mister, I have to work in order to eat, you know? I do what I can, but I have to go to the city to earn money for food and everything else." Hey, wait. I didn't say you weren't doing anything. I understand that we didn't pay you anything. I just said I needed help to do a little more. If we're both working, I want the place to look a little nicer, okay? Okay, but I don't like it when you talk like I'm messing around, okay? Frank and I walked around the area, figuring out where we could put the trailer. Mandy stayed to talk to. Hell, I didn't even ask her name. After some time, she caught up with us. "I think Jolene is in a better mood now," she said. I explained something to her, and she calmed down a little. "Steve, you have to understand that some people here are very sensitive. You should be careful how you talk until you get to know them better. You lived nearby, but in your part of the country people behave differently than here. Of course, those who work in Branson in the tourism industry have adapted a little, but even they are returning to their usual routine at home." It was the end of March. The weather was cool. The next morning, I started working on getting the trailer to camp. The state and county roads were easy to navigate, but I had to cut down a few small trees and clear some brush to follow the trail to the old resort. This took all day. I bought a chainsaw specifically for this job and decided to leave it in place. I knew that I would still need it, and I didn't see the point in carrying it back and forth. Jolene came out several times to watch me work. When I headed towards her house, she came out onto the porch. "Hey, Jolene, I think I'm done for today. I thought I'd leave the saw here if there was a safe place for it. Yes, I keep all the tools in the old workshop. There is also a lawnmower there. I'll go get the keys now." When she returned, she handed me the key. "Here you go, Steve. This is a spare key for the lock. If you lose it, I have a second one. It hangs on a nail next to the front door. And the spare key to the house is hidden under the rafters of the second house over there." When we entered the workshop, I looked around. All the equipment was old, but it was clear that Jolene had taken care of it. She noticed my gaze and said, "I know it's not a new technique, but my husband and I tried to keep everything in order. He died 2 years ago. His heart could not stand it. Now I'm alone. The children left. One is in Branson, the other lives in Springfield with his wife. It gets lonely sometimes, but I just can't leave here. My husband's father was the caretaker here when old fellows still lived here. When we got married, we first lived in Hollister, but then we had to move here to care for him. And when he died, we just stayed and did what we could. It's okay, Jolene. Thank you. Before leaving, I will give you my mobile number. I think you still have my address if you need anything. We received utility bills from you." "Yes, I have." "Okay, then I'll walk a little more and go to the trailer. I think I'll try to get him here tomorrow. I haven't decided yet where to finally put it, but the main thing is that it is here, and I don't have to travel back and forth." The next morning I had to be careful, but I still managed to move the trailer into camp. For now, I placed it next to Jolene's house to use water and electricity. In the morning, I looked around all the houses and grounds to find a permanent place for the trailer. In the end, I found the perfect place. It was at the end of an open clearing with a magnificent view of the lake. From there, you could see the sun rise in the east and set in the west. There was shade there during the day and evening, and there was probably a cool breeze blowing from the lake. It looked like it was an old campsite. I even found a water pipe with a frost-resistant tap, but there was no water in it. At the edge of the thicket lay a fallen electrical pole. By mid-afternoon, I had the trailer in place and leveled. The rest of the day was spent burning garbage and brushwood. When Jolene returned from work, she stood at a distance, crossed her hands on her hips, and surveyed the area. I smiled and waved to her. "Well, Steve, I see that you have found a good place for your new home. You've done a lot here. I'm already getting lazy. You get twice as much done in a day as I do." The next morning, I drove to Branson and rented a backhoe and loader, then drove back. I spent the rest of the day digging a trench for a new water line and using a forklift to remove brush. When Jolene returned home, she silently examined the work, shook her head, and went into the house. The next day, I laid the pipe from the well to the trailer, buried it, and leveled the ground. Then I took care of the road, cleared the ditches, and cleared away the brush around the edges. I also cleaned up the beach near the lake and the small creek bed that flowed into the lake near my trailer. After that, I dug up a plot for a garden and returned the excavator. I sowed grass in the areas I dug up and covered them with straw the next day, and then just spent most of the day relaxing. The temperature was in the mid-60s, and I hung the hammock so I could look out over the lake while relaxing. My next project was to renovate part of the dock so that I could take the boat out of storage and moor it. I planned to do a lot of fishing when the season opened. I invested money into furnishing the old place, but not too much. All this was cheaper than my travels, and I think I was happier. I kept in touch with several people I met while traveling around the country, all of whom were interested in hearing about my project. In fact, a couple of people even said they would come visit me if they had a place to park their RV for a few nights. This encouraged me, and I spent a few more days clearing areas for their parking. I called my son and asked him to bring one of our excavators and a dump truck so I could use them. I continued to repair the road, brought in a few loads of gravel to improve it, and then decided that after installing additional water and electrical lines, I would pour concrete pads on the cleared RV sites. Now Jolene was no longer surprised when she returned home and discovered another large-scale change. Moreover, sometimes in the evenings, if I was still working, she would come out and help me. I also continued to communicate with Maria and her parents. She was really interested in my project, and every time we talked, she wanted to know what new things I had done. She reacted enthusiastically to the photographs I sent her, and one day said that she would really like to see it all in person. I replied, "So come. It is very beautiful here in early June. Come to me, take your parents with you if they want. Maybe I really will come. Will you reserve a place for me somewhere? No, I have a house here that is in good condition. I'll tidy it up a little, fix the main problems, and you can stay there if you come with the whole family. And if you come alone, that's fine too. I've got some friends coming over this summer, and I've set up sites for their RVs, so if you're bringing your RV, you can stay at one of them." My kids thought I was crazy for doing all this work and spending money on the old camp, but after a heated discussion, they accepted that it was my land and my money, so if it brought me joy, then so be it. In addition, it seems that they decided that they themselves would enjoy spending several weekends here during the warm season. My first guest arrived in mid-May. They pulled into a lot with a 36-foot fifth-wheel trailer and could barely squeeze down the road. We spent a few minutes getting it set up correctly on site and connected. On the first day, we just talked and remembered what had happened since our last meeting. Over the next week, they visited local tourist spots, went to a show in Branson, and even rode my pontoon boat on the lake one day. About the time the first family was about to leave, more friends arrived with a slightly smaller trailer. We accommodated them too, and they followed the same script as the first guests. Jolene still didn't know how to feel about all these changes, but I noticed that sometimes in the evenings she came to visit them. One evening, sitting by the fire, the second guests complained, "Steve, why don't you keep some basic products in the store? It would be much more convenient that way." "Hey, take it easy," I replied. "I'm not organizing camping here. This place has belonged to my family for many years, and I made the sites simply for friends and family so that they would have a place to stay." "What? You're sitting on a gold mine, Steve. I thought you were going to take this seriously. I had already told someone how cool it was here, and several friends were planning to come here. Now they have to call and tell them to look for another place to park if they want to visit Branson. When the first family was leaving, they tried to pay me for the place, but I refused because I considered them friends and guests, not clients. Come on, Steve. Of course, you are our friend, but you have invested a lot of effort and money into this place. We used your water, electricity, and sewer. You should at least take something for this. He handed me the check and said, "Hold it. Here is the amount for electricity and water. Besides, I never paid you for the boat and gas. Of course, this is not the amount that they charge in normal campsites, but I figured that $30 a day for a site was quite fair, and added another $250 for a boat with fuel. And don't even think about refusing. My wife and I want to come back here again. It is very calm and pleasant here. Now, if you also had a swimming pool, it would be absolutely perfect." When the second guests left, they also insisted on leaving me a small check for electricity. Imagine my surprise when Maria called me late in the evening of June 1st. "Steve, did you seriously say that I could come to you in early June?" "Of course, Maria. Will you come? I would be glad to see you here. I miss our conversations, and I would really like to see you." "Oh, how good. I was afraid you were just being polite. When can we come?" "Anytime you want. I'm not really doing anything here. I'm just working little by little. Several friends have already stayed with me, but they left last week. Now it's just me and the caretaker. Steve, we're in Hollister now. Can you come over this evening?" "Damn, of course you can. Do you need directions? Or should I go out to meet you? What did you come with?" "We're on Daddy's house on wheels. Is this not a problem?" "Oh, damn, it won't be easy, Maria. The camp itself will accept it without any problems, but a couple of turns on the road are quite narrow, and the road to the camp itself is very narrow." Maria and her parents entered the address into their GPS, and before I could even open the gate, they were already there. I looked at their class, a motorhome, and froze. Damn, I knew they were huge, but this one looked like a monster trying to squeeze into my narrow entryway. I watched and guided as Phil, Mary's father, slowly moved through the gate and began to move down the road. I walked ahead of him and followed the movement. There was one sharp turn that bothered me. When he got there and was already halfway there, I had to stop him. The rear wheels were starting to slide off the road into a ditch, and it was deep enough that he would get stuck if he continued driving. I approached the motorhome and asked him to reverse. Luckily, I still had my backhoe and some loads of gravel in camp. I went there and brought in some buckets of gravel to fill the ditches on both sides of the curve, so he could drive into them and turn around safely. At one point, I had to cut a couple of branches so he could drive under them. When we came into view, Jolene was standing in the yard, her mouth agape in amazement. She just watched as Phil pulled his huge motorhome into the space next to mine and connected to the utilities. When he came out to connect the lines, she came up to us and said, "Well, not in my wildest dreams could I imagine that I would see this here. You guys must be crazy to bring this thing into our hills." I was still listening to Jolene when a small figure jumped down from the last step of the motorhome, deftly dodged Phil, and jumped into my arms. Maria wrapped her legs around my waist and pressed her lips to mine in a kiss. My hands instinctively wrapped around her flexible waist to hold her. A few moments passed before I kissed her back, and then I carefully pulled myself away from her grip. I took a step back and looked at her. Her eyes were shining, she was blushing, and her chest was heaving rapidly with rapid breathing. "Oh, Steve, it's so great to see you again. I missed you so much." I looked at Phil and Felicia as she walked down the steps. My mouth was slightly open in surprise, but Phil just grinned, shrugged, and winked. Maria came closer and hugged my waist. To say that I was stunned is an understatement. I didn't know how to react, and it seems that Maria finally understood it. She pulled back a little and looked into my face. "Steve, is something wrong?" No. You just caught me off guard. Nice to see you all." At that moment, a small car drove into the yard. I looked and smiled as Amanda jumped out of her and ran towards me. She hugged me and kissed me on the cheek, then stepped back. She looked at my new guests and said, "Hello, guys. I'm Mandy. I didn't know you were already here. I just stopped by to talk to Steve for a minute, and then I won't disturb you." Mandy's eyes sparkled with joy, and she could barely contain her excitement. Her beautiful breasts heaved in the tight embrace of her bra. The evening sun made her light summer dress almost transparent. It was obvious that she was a real woman. "Steve, I just had to come here first and tell you the news. Oh, Steve, I got the job. I'm the new assistant manager at Ride the Ducks. I work from noon until closing. Now I can give you back the money you spent on me in Florida. I just couldn't help but tell you before I went home. Mandy, honey, we had an agreement in Florida. You bought the food and I paid for the trailer space. You don't owe me anything anymore. I would have spent almost the same if I was alone. Yes, I know, but at least I have to pay you back for the trip home, and I will do it." Maria looked at Amanda, her face tense, her jaw clenched, and anger sparkling in her eyes. I noticed tears in the corners of her eyes. I saw a glimpse of that same hot Mexican temper I had encountered a couple of times in San Antonio. She turned around abruptly and almost ran into the mobile home. Felicia looked at me and followed her silently. Phil looked at me, then at Amanda, shook his head, and continued plugging in his RV. Amanda looked from me to the door of their mobile home. "Steve, did something happen? I didn't want to interfere." "I don't know, Mandy. This is Maria and her family. I think I told you about them. They have a campground near San Antonio. We became friends while I was living there, and I invited them to come visit. They just arrived, and everything seemed to be fine until you showed up." Amanda thought for a moment, then winced and muttered, "Damn. Is this the same girl you were talking to all the time? The one you like?" I nodded. "Steve, I'm sorry. Looks like I ruined everything. Damn, I hope I can fix this." Mandy walked around the front of the motorhome and said, "Sir, I think I did something stupid. Can I come inside and try to smooth things over with your wife and daughter?" I didn't hear what Phil said, but Mandy walked up to the door, knocked, and walked in without waiting for an answer. I stood looking at the door when Phil came back and stood next to me. At that moment, Maria's scream was heard from inside the mobile home. I couldn't make out the words, but I could clearly see that she was not happy. Then there was the sound of a slap and Mandy screamed. Then Felicia spoke, her voice also raised. Phil looked at me and said, "Well, son, it looks like we have a real problem here. If you had another woman, you should have told Maria about it before we arrived. You know she hasn't looked at any man since you left. All she could talk about was coming here and seeing you. Son, how long have you been dating this lady?" I didn't know which of his questions to answer first. I was shocked. Damn, I knew Maria and I were close in Texas. We had sex like rabbits, but damn, I'm 40 and she's, well, maybe 28? Hell, she's almost the same age as my kids, and she seems to think we're a couple. Damn, what should I do now? I finally collected my thoughts and decided to answer all the questions in reverse order. I explained the situation with Amanda, that we were just good friends, and told how it happened that we lived and traveled together. Then he added, "Damn it, Phil. I had no idea that Maria considered us more than just great friends." Phil looked at me and said, "Son, do you really think that my Maria jumps into bed with any of our guests? I thought better of you." "Damn it, Phil. You know that's not what I meant. Oh damn, I don't know what I meant. Looks like I really screwed up, huh?" There had been silence in the mobile home for some time. The door opened and Amanda came out. There was a red spot on her cheek. Maria followed, looking ashamed with her eyes downcast. Felicia was the last to emerge, looking both embarrassed and pleased. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw no blood. Well, at least not real blood. I walked over to Amanda and gently touched her cheek. She took my hand and squeezed it. "It's okay, Steve. I think we've got it all sorted out. And now I need to go home. Can you walk me to the car?" Mandy pulled me aside from the others. When we got to her car, she stood up on her tiptoes, kissed me on the cheek, and whispered, "Steve, this woman loves you madly. If you have any brains, you will grab onto it and never let go. Now I have to go home, and you need to talk to Maria." I hugged Mandy, then closed the car door behind her. I watched her drive away, then turned and headed back to the Hardys, who were standing outside their caravan watching me. Maria looked guilty and looked at me with some kind of fear. I walked up to the group and took Maria by the hands. I squeezed them, then lifted her chin to look into her eyes. We were silent. Then I turned to her father and said, "Look, I hate to be a bad boss, but could you and Felicia relax a little? I need to talk to Maria alone." Maria looked scared again. As we walked away, I noticed Phil's slight wink. I wonder if he was really that sure, or what. Hell, I didn't even know what I was going to say or do. Maria and I were silent as we walked. After a few steps, I felt her take my hand. I looked at her and noticed how she stole a glance at me. I took her to a secluded place that I had prepared in advance. There I had a hammock and some chairs around the fire pit. This place was secluded. You couldn't see the campsite from here, but you had a view of the lake where you could watch sunsets and sunrises. Low bushes hid me from prying eyes from the boats, unless I stood in a certain place, which was important, because sometimes I lay naked in the hammock. There was a short path nearby to a stream where I set up a small plunge pool for skinny dipping. I did not sit down on the chair, but stopped and turned to Maria. I gently pulled her into my arms. He kissed the top of the head, took a deep breath, and said, "Maria, I'm probably just a stupid guy. I knew we were close. We had great moments in San Antonio. I felt closer to you than to any other woman I met during my journey. I think it was you who helped me begin to heal and overcome the betrayal and death of my wife. You were my friend and lover at a time when I desperately needed both. I always looked forward to our telephone conversations and was very glad when you agreed to come to me." I took a deep breath and continued, I just never thought. Damn, I have a son who is 6 years younger than you. I had no idea that you could have such feelings for me." Maria burst into tears and, through her tears, said in a trembling voice, "Steve, how could you? Do you think I throw myself into bed with any handsome man who chats to me at the campsite? Do you think I'm some kind of a girl of easy virtue? I thought you felt the same way as me. I don't care about your age. It doesn't matter the age of your children. You are important to me. When you left, I thought we had an agreement. We agreed to keep in touch until you were completely healed and agreed to meet again. After I met you and we spent time together, I did not see a single man who could be even slightly interested in me. You showed me that a man can be gentle, loving, and caring, and still be a very man, a real man. And now you're telling me you don't love me, that I was just a piece of meat to you. No, Maria, never. You are so much more to me than that. You are an amazing, beautiful, smart woman. I think about you often and enjoy your company, even when we are not making love. I just never thought that you might see me as more than just a great friend. When I get married again, I will consider myself immensely happy if my wife is like you." "But not at me," Maria whispered. "Do you mean that it's not a child like me?" I lifted her face and kissed her tenderly. "No, Maria, that's not what I want to say. I need time to process this amazing gift you are offering me. I think about you even in those moments when we don't talk. I got excited many times just thinking about you and missed you terribly. Even when Amanda and I lived together, I thought about you. Did she tell you there was nothing between us?" Maria nodded, then smiled slightly and said quietly, "I'm not sure I believe her. She is a beautiful woman and I think a good person. I'm not sure a man could live with her in a small trailer for 3 months without sleeping with her." I hugged Maria and said, "Darling, even when I saw her half naked, I rarely got excited. Only now I realized you were the last woman I made love to." Maria pressed her lips tightly together and then asked, "That's good, Steve. But how many are you with? Had sex after me?" "Not one, Maria. There were many women before you, after Joan's death, but not one after you. I thought about it sometimes, but decided I was holding off because of Mandy." Maria began to get angry, and I hastened to explain. "No, Maria, not in that sense. I mean, I used to bring women to the trailer, and when Mandy lived there, I didn't feel comfortable." "Oh shit. No matter how I explain myself, it will sound bad. I admitted that after you, no woman interested me. Of course, I noticed beautiful women like any man, but I did not try to get close to any of them. After you, there was only one woman in my bed, Amanda. One day, some students tried to pester her at dinner. She was upset, and I cuddled her in bed for part of the night. But we were fully dressed. Maria smiled and said, "Yes, she told me about that night. She said her feelings were hurt when she woke up and found you sleeping on the couch she usually used. She said she wanted you to make love to her, but you didn't even try. She said that the next morning she found you in the bed where she usually slept with morning excitement, and you were embarrassed, explaining that that was why you left her bed." Maria laughed and added, "You know, I think I believe you. I think you love me, you're just too stupid to understand it. Let's see. Well, shall we go to Mom and Dad?" On the second night of Maria and her family's stay, she came to my trailer again. I was already asleep, and the first thing that made me realize that she was here was her warm, naked body sliding into my bed. She threw her leg over mine and pressed her wonderful breasts against me. I hugged her and hugged her even tighter. She sighed and settled comfortably on my chest. We fell asleep again. The next morning, I woke up before her. We were still hugging each other, her head resting on my shoulder. I looked down at Maria. Her hair fell softly over her shoulders, and her breathing was calm and measured. Something warm and familiar slid across my skin, making my heart beat faster. I carefully tried to get out from under her, but she, as if sensing the movement, moaned quietly and pressed herself closer to me, intertwining our bodies. Her eyelids fluttered, and after a moment she raised her head, looking into my eyes with that same radiance that always drove me crazy. Her fingers slid over my chest, causing tremors throughout my body. "You can't even imagine how much I missed you," Maria whispered, gently touching my neck with her lips. Her voice was filled with something deep, real, as if at that moment only the two of us existed. I ran my hand over her back, feeling the warmth of her skin, and simply enjoyed this moment, her closeness, her breathing, her quiet, contented sigh. This time everything was different. Passion captured us completely. Maria moved boldly and confidently, completely surrendering to her feelings. I watched her, admiring her every move, then ran my hands over her body, gently touching her skin. She responded to my touches, her breathing hitched, and her body tensed in the peak of pleasure. Her movements were full of desire, and it drove me crazy. I hugged her tighter, feeling the tension growing between us. At that moment, everything around disappeared, only we remained, immersed in a whirlwind of emotions, merging in a single rhythm. When the wave covered us both, we froze, feeling overwhelming pleasure and closeness. Finally, we both relaxed. Maria collapsed on top of me, her breathing gradually evening out. She sat up a little and kissed me softly again, then giggled, jumped out of bed, and ran to the tiny bathroom in my trailer. When she came out, she was already dressed in shorts and a crop top, which, apparently, she was wearing when she came to me. She smiled and said, "It's late, honey. Mom is preparing breakfast for us. If she's not late, and she never is, he'll be ready in about 5 minutes." She leaned towards me again and gave me another tender kiss. "See you there, dear." I watched her beautiful ass jiggle until she disappeared out the door. The rest of the week we relaxed, fished, lazily spent time at camp, or attended shows they wanted to see. Sometimes we toured the buildings and grounds. The more they saw, the more Maria and Phil tried to convince me to revive the site as a campground and RV park. On Friday morning, Phil and I drove into town to get groceries and supplies. I still did a little work every day, but just a little, mostly shopping to ensure the comfort of Maria and her parents. When we returned, Maria and Felicia were working in the house, which was in the best condition. They had already removed some rotten boards, removed the carpet from the living room, and were halfway ready to remove the ruined kitchen cabinets. Maria turned as we entered and approached me with a smile. She hugged me tightly and gave me a long, burning kiss. Then she pulled back a little and looked at me with a slight feeling of guilt. "Darling, please don't be mad at us for starting the renovation without talking to you. While you were away, we discussed this and decided that this house could be renovated for little money. Even if we buy new cabinets and appliances, I think we'll get it under $5,000 if we do it all ourselves. She went on to say that someone had called and asked if they could come with a motorhome, and she had already invited them, after which they decided to take on the renovation. I laughed and hugged her. Her enthusiasm was infectious. Okay, we'll finish this cabin and I'll fix up a few more RV sites. I will call Alex in the evening to arrange to leave the excavator for longer and ask him to send the necessary tools. Maria was a little embarrassed, but continued. Thank you, darling. You won't regret it. Also, maybe we could open a little shop. Sell goods that vacationers quickly run out of: dry food, soda, canned food. And if you attract fishermen, then you can sell the gear. Also, if you get a license to sell alcohol, you can make good money selling beer. It's flying around in our park. Could we do this? I laughed again. I'm not sure, Maria. Jolene lives in the old office and store, which is where we would have to put everything. In addition, most likely, refrigerators would have to be replaced. I'm not sure she'll like it if there's a store there again. Maybe we should at least ask. Or will we convert another house into an office and store? She faltered, but continued. Jolene, of course, is a good woman, but she doesn't do almost anything here for free housing. Maybe she should help her more or pay her something. I don't know, Maria. I'm not very comfortable raising this question. Let me think a little. On Saturday morning, Maria and her mother went into the city to choose carpets and furniture. Phil seemed to be dozing. I was sitting in the shade, relaxing, when Jolene came out and sat next to me. How are you this wonderful morning, Jolene? I think it's okay, Steve. I just feel a little superfluous, maybe even guilty. I know that I don't really help as much as I used to. And also, the place is changing. There are more people. Not the same comfort as it used to be. You know, if you're going to start a new park, I probably don't want to stay here. Jolene, I'm sorry. I think I should have talked to you about this earlier. When I came here, I just wanted to park my trailer and live in silence like you. And then my friends called me and wanted to visit, and I made several places for them. Now, damn, I don't know how to say this without sounding bad, but I guess Maria and I. Jolene laughed and interrupted me. Yes, I understood everything a long time ago. Damn, a blind man would notice what's going on with you. When are you going to make it official? I don't think this woman has any plans to leave when her parents leave, you know. It's not good to keep her in limbo without letting her know how seriously you take her. But that's not what I wanted to say, she continued. It looks like you've decided to open a caravan camp here, and I don't want to live in a place like that. Is that so, Steve? I didn't plan this, but I guess it turned out that way, Jolene. Maria is delighted with this idea, and Phil and Felicia believe that everything will work out. I don't want to quit working completely at my age, but I don't want to go back home to start the construction business again either. I think I'll let Maria talk me into opening a small RV park and see what happens. Hell, she even wants to set up a small store with groceries, snacks, and beer for our guests and the fishermen she thinks will be using our dock. I was afraid that this was all going to happen, Jolene sighed. Steve, would you mind if I find another, more secluded place and leave? No, I understand. I can't say that I myself want to tolerate noisy people, but I think for Maria's sake, I will have to. I admit I have a crush on this girl, and if she wants an RV park, let her have an RV park. She grew up in this place, so she knows how to manage it. Phil and Felicia decided to stay an extra 2 weeks, enough time to finish renovating one of the booths and do most of the heavy lifting in the shop and office. After Jolene left, Maria and I planned to remodel the living quarters in the office building and move there. There was a spacious living room, kitchen dining area, and 2 bedrooms, more than enough for the 2 of us. Frankly, I had plans to make everything very comfortable. I loved the comfort of my home. When traveling and camping, I could put up with minimal amenities, but home has always been a fortress for me, where I wanted to feel as comfortable as possible. One day, when we were in town shopping before Maria's parents left, I bought her an engagement ring. I don't remember that I formally proposed to her, but I was quite happy with how things turned out. She just took me to the store and we picked out a ring together. The smile never left her face all evening. Every time I looked at her, she was either admiring the ring or showing it to her mother. After the women had had their fill of admiring the ring, and we had finished the barbecue in my secluded spot by the creek, Phil and Felicia left. I opened the storage box I kept in my grotto and took out a foam mattress and a blanket. Maria and I sat in an embrace, watching the sun finally disappear behind the horizon and night fall. We explored each other's bodies until we reached the point where we couldn't hold back any longer. Maria squirmed impatiently on the soft mattress as I slowly removed her clothes. In the silver light of the full moon, her eyes sparkled with excitement. I leaned towards her, gently touching her neck with my lips, catching her ragged breath. Her fingers slid along my back and then squeezed tightly, as if not wanting to break this moment of intimacy. I felt her heart beating faster and a tremor running through her body. We moved in the same rhythm, getting lost in time. The night enveloped us in a blanket of stars. The air was filled with warmth and trust. That night we belonged only to each other, dissolving in moments of tenderness and love. The next morning, shortly after 8, I woke up to find Maria lying on her side, her head propped up on her hand, looking at me. Her eyes were moist and her face glowed with love. "Good morning, my love," she whispered and kissed me tenderly. "I promise that I will be the best wife you could ever dream of. You are my life, my main goal, my everything. I belong to you and only you. All I ask is that you take care of me and my heart the same way I will take care of you. Nothing else matters to me." We removed the mattress and, as naked as we slept, went to a small stream. We washed off the remnants of the night's love in cool water, using soap that I kept in a tin nailed to a tree. We played, caressing each other, lathering and rinsing off the foam, and then returned to the chairs to dry off in the sun. About half an hour later, we walked back to Phil and Felicia's trailer, holding hands. Phil sat in a chair under his awning with his morning coffee. Felicia was busy at the small gas stove and grill that I had installed for the convenience of the campers. Phil smiled at us and said, "Hey, Steve, do you still have cougars here? I haven't heard of anyone seeing them. There have been reports of black bears, but never of cougars." And what? Yes, about 45 minutes after we went to bed, I would swear that I heard their screams and howls. This damn noise either died down or came back all night long, just wondering what it could be. Maria flushed and looked angrily at her father. "Dad, how could you?" Phil stood up, hugged his daughter, and kissed her forehead tenderly. Then he said, "Daughter, listening to you was a joy for my old heart. You did what a good woman should do with her man. If you took care of him as well as he sounded like he took care of you, then you would have a wonderful life together. I just couldn't help but make fun of you a little. Yes, and I wanted to thank you." Phil looked at Felicia and continued, "Listening to you, my mother, and I also got a little turned on. I haven't worked so hard at night for a long time." Felicia turned around sharply and looked angrily at her husband. "Oh, you old scoundrel. Maybe if you worked less during the day and paid more attention at night, this would happen more often." "Sorry, honey," Phil replied. "I didn't know it bothered you. I promise I'll fix it." Felicia laughed and began to step back as Phil advanced towards her. She held out her hands in a warning gesture and, still laughing, said, "Oh no, not that. I'm not sure I can handle it if you get even more passionate than you already are, you old asshole. I take my words back. In the bedroom, in the living room, in the kitchen, and wherever you catch me, you do just fine." Phil laughed, grabbed his wife in his arms, and captured her lips with a deep, passionate kiss. I heard her soft moan as she pressed herself against him. Then she gently pushed him away and said, "Enough, enough. Look, you've embarrassed your daughter and future son-in-law again. Now sit down, finish your coffee, and I'll pour a cup for our children. Let's have some coffee, and then I'll finish cooking breakfast." Felicia turned to me and asked, "Are huevos rancheros and breakfast burritos okay, Steve?" My mouth watered when I remembered how delicious her Tex-Mex breakfasts were. I pulled Maria to me and said, "Sounds great. I hope you taught Maria how to cook all these special dishes that you have spoiled me with since we met. Felicia laughed. Maria is an excellent cook. In fact, some of the dishes you like so much are things she taught me. I think you won't be disappointed with her cooking or anything else. Maria blushed again. Mom, I laughed again and sat down in the chair next to Phil and pulled Maria onto my lap. She turned away from her parents and I ran my hand under her skirt. Maria moaned quietly and moved her hips towards my touch. Then she leaned towards my ear and whispered, "Steve, stop, please. Please don't make me so embarrassed. I would never deliberately embarrass you, my dear. Now get off, let me drink some coffee, otherwise I'll take you somewhere and we'll be late for breakfast." Felicia smiled as she handed me the cup. When Maria passed by, she said, "He's just like your dad, honey. I'm sure you will have a wonderful life. So glad you found each other and were able to move on from the terrible people you were married to." Phil and Felicia left 2 days later. Maria and I continued to work on setting up our new campsite. By the end of the summer, we had 12 bare tent sites, 9 trailer sites, and 3 cabin rentals. The remaining 5 old houses required almost complete reconstruction, so we decided not to touch them for now until we were sure that the business would take off. We got a liquor license and bought new refrigerators for beer and some chilled food. I tried not to buy anything for the store that we ourselves couldn't eat if no one bought it. Kept a couple of gallons of milk, some juice, and several cases of various sodas. They also sold chocolate bars, chips, and other small items. Of course, there were also products: vegetables, canned food, flour, coffee, sugar, and other basic goods. We didn't keep any fresh meat, except for a few packages of cold cuts. Everything else was kept frozen so that if they didn't buy it, we could use it ourselves. Even without much advertising, tourists began to come to us. Once I put up some signs and placed ads in travel magazines, business took off. Some weekends we were fully booked. I had to expand the assortment in the store, and it began to make a small profit. Maria was happy, and when she was happy, she made me very happy. You can proceed further without comment. We decided to close the campsite at the end of September, when the tourist season was coming to an end. We spent a couple of weeks cleaning and renovating, and then headed to San Antonio to visit Maria's parents and get married. Everyone said the wedding was perfect. I guess they did, but as you know, it's more of a women's issue, so I'll take their word for it. I took Maria to Florida for our honeymoon, and then we returned to San Antonio. We agreed to manage her parents' car park from November to February so they could travel. In March, we returned home and opened our own fleet for the summer season. Phil and Felicia came to us in the summer, leaving their park to a fairly competent assistant. During the summer, their business was minimal, but they still spent most of the season there to keep things running smoothly. During the winter, when we managed Phil and Felicia's fleet, I kept Amanda as our fleet caretaker. She did minor cleaning, repairs, and made sure there were no acts of vandalism. She lived in one of the houses. She worked seasonal jobs in Branson during the summers. Over time, I even hired her to help out part-time in the evenings and some weekends during the summer. As part of her salary, I allowed her to continue living in the cabin. In the second year of our married life, Maria persuaded me to have a child. She said that she would be happy with one child, but she really wanted my child. We had a son whom we named Stephen Philip Rowland. From the very beginning, Maria was completely different from Joan. I had no idea how big of a difference there was between a marriage based on love and respect and the one I had with Joan. Joan and I got married because it was the right thing to do, and I think she was angry about it all her life. I suspect that if she hadn't gotten pregnant, we would never have gotten married. But with Maria, everything is different. I know I'll die if she dies or leaves me, but her leaving or cheating is the only thing I don't have to worry about. Maria has always been hotter in bed than Joan, and she always lets me know that I come first to her. Looking back, I realize that I never received such love and respect from Joan. She never looked as happy in our lives as Maria did in ours. I hated what Joan did to us, but now maybe I understand what exactly she was looking for. I know it sounds corny, but Maria and I are one. Where one is, there is another. We work within each other's sight and never tire of each other's company. Joan and I have never had such closeness. Now I clearly see that we were both almost looking for reasons not to be close. Even when we were at home, we were rarely in the same room and never took the opportunity to just touch and kiss as often as Maria and I do. Don't get me wrong, of course we sometimes travel on business or go shopping alone, but that's about it. No nights out without a significant other, no bachelor or bachelorette parties. People who do this are not family, they just live together. Amanda has finally found the perfect man. I like to think that Maria and I helped her with this. One of my friends from my hometown lost his wife to a terrible disease. We invited him to stay in one of our houses several times so he could get away for a bit. After about a year, we noticed that whenever he visited, Amanda was always with him. They got closer and closer, and finally it happened. One Sunday morning, Amanda came to our house beaming with happiness. She showed us her new engagement ring. Amanda still helps out at the car park, and she and Wally live in the same house where she used to live alone. Wally took a job in maintenance at Silver Dollar City. Amanda quit her job in the city. She is now a homemaker and mother when she is not helping us run the park. I even added another room to their house for their child. It took me a trip across the country to get over my wife's betrayal and her death. At first, I thought I would never be able to get over the pain she caused me. But now I know for sure that I have left it behind and live a much happier and calmer life than I could ever have imagined 5 years ago, on that terrible night when everything collapsed. I thank my Spanish angel for her love and guidance on this journey through life. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to the next